Senoritas, I am UROBILINOGEN-Bungabong, and today we will talk about the chemical examination of urine, specifically urobilinogen. So first, let's all talk about the chemical examination of urine. So chemical examination of urine, it tests chemically for about 10 substances that provide valuable information about health and disease and determines the concentration of the urine. It is most commonly carried out in the surgery or outpatient clinic by medical technologies using commercially prepared test strips. And these test strips are narrow plastic strips that hold test pads arranged in a row. The test pads have chemicals in them. When a strip is briefly but completely dipped into a urine, the test pads absorb the urine and a chemical reaction changes the color of the pad. So, chemical examination of urine includes the following: pH, protein, glucose, ketones, blood, bilirubin, urobilinogen, nitrite, leukocytes, and lastly, specific gravity. But now, let's all focus about urobilinogen. So, what is urobilinogen? So, it is a colorless pigment that produced from the breakdown of bilirubin by gut bacteria. So, the majority of this compound is excreted in the feces and a small amount is reabsorbed and excreted in the urine. So, where does urobilinogen came from? So, when a conjugated bilirubin is excreted through the bile duct into the intestine, so it is further converted by the intestinal bacteria into urobilinogen and stercobilinogen. So, some of the urobilinogen is reabsorbed from the intestine into the blood, recirculates to the liver, and is excreted back into the intestine where it is oxidized to urobilin. While stercobilinogen, it cannot be reabsorbed and it remains in the intestine where it is oxidized into stercobilin. So both of the urobilinogen and stercobilinogen are excreted in the feces and are pigments responsible for the brown color of the feces. So next, why does urobilinogen appears in urine? So as urobilinogen circulates in the blood back to the liver, it passes through the kidney and is filtered by the glomerulus. So that is the reason why there is a small amount of urobilinogen appears in the urine. So the normal value of urobilinogen in the urine is less than 1 mg per dl or Ehrlich unit. So now, let's talk about the clinical significance of urobilinogen. So first is that the clinical significance includes the following: hemolytic disease, liver damage, and bile duct obstruction. So in hemolytic disease, it has a negative result in bilirubin, while in urobilinogen, it has a 3+ or 3 positive. While in liver damage, it has a positive or negative result in bilirubin, and in urobilinogen, it has a 2+ or 2 positives. And lastly, in bile duct obstruction, it has a 3+ or 3 positives, while in urobilinogen, it has a decrease or the absence of urobilinogen in urine. And studies also show that 1% of non-hospitalized population and 9% of hospitalized population has elevated results of urobilinogen tests due to constipation. So now let's first talk about the hemolytic disorder. So increased urine urobilinogen, which is greater than 1 mg per dl, is seen in hemolytic disorder. So a urobilinogen overload may be caused by the release of larger quantities of hemoglobin, where there is a destruction of the abnormally high number of red blood cells. So hemolytic disorders include the following: hemolytic anemia and pernicious anemia. So next, we'll talk about the liver damage. So increased urine urobilinogen is also seen in liver disease. Impairment of liver function decreases the ability of the liver to process urobilinogen recirculated from the intestine. So the excess urobilinogen remaining in the blood is filtered by the kidneys and appears in the urine. And additionally, overworked liver does not process the reabsorbed urobilinogen as efficiently, and additional urobilinogen is presented in the urinary excretion. And last clinical significance is the bile duct obstruction. So, decrease or absence of urobilinogen cannot be determined in reagent strip. So, the absorbance of its feces and urine is also diagnostically significant and represents an obstruction of bile duct. So, obstruction of bile duct prevents the passage of bilirubin or normal passage of bilirubin into the intestine. So in biliary obstruction, below normal amounts of conjugated bilirubin reach the intestines for conversion to urobilinogen. So with limited amount of urobilinogen available for absorption and excretion, so it results to a low amount of urobilinogen in urine. So, I know makurious nga nung sa bilirubin is it has a 3+ sa table, and then it has a decrease or absence of urobilinogen in the bile duct obstruction. So as we all know that the bile duct obstruction prevents the normal passage of bilirubin into the intestine. So it prevents the normal passage, which means that it leaks back into the blood circulation. So when it leaks back, after that, it will directly excreted into the urine. So that's the reason nga nung na-ay 3+ sa bilirubin. Well, in urobilinogen, so, di ba, kay ang bilirubin kay na-excrete naman, na may uban nga na-excrete sa urine, so only a little will reach into the intestine. So that's the reason gamay ra sad ang bilirubin nga ma-convert into urobilinogen. At the same time, tungod sa gamay nga urobilinogen, so low ra sad ang amount nga moabot sa urine. So that's the reason nga nung decrease or there is an absence of urobilinogen. And also, the absence cannot be determined in reagent strip. So remember that one, it cannot be determined in reagent strip. So next is we will talk about the correlations with other tests. So the correlations with other tests is the bilirubin. So clinical jaundice associated with hemolytic disorders from the increased amount circulating unconjugated bilirubin. So this unconjugated bilirubin is presented to the liver for conjugation, resulting in a markedly increased amount of conjugated bilirubin entering the intestine. So as a result, increased urobilinogen is produced and are reabsorbed into the blood and is circulated through the kidneys where filtration takes place. So correlated sila sa each other because as the bilirubin increases also, the urobilinogen also increases in this kind of clinical jaundice, which is associated with hemolytic disorders. So next is that we will talk about the reagent strip reactions. So the reagent strip reactions for urobilinogen differ between multi-sticks and chemstrips. So in multi-sticks, the p-dimethyl aminobenzaldehyde is used, while in chemstrips is the 4-methoxybenzene diazonium tetrafluoroborate is used. So both of which has a reading time which is 60 seconds. So always remember that in this reagent strip, the two kinds of reagent strips, it detects the presence of urobilinogen in normal amount, and also colors are provided in order to differentiate the upper limits of the normal as well as the abnormal concentrations. And lastly, we must remember that in reagent strip reaction, the absence of urobilinogen cannot be detected, like the bile duct obstruction. So next is we will focus about the reagent strip reactions multi-sticks. So multi-sticks uses Ehrlich aldehyde reaction in which urobilinogen reacts with the p-dimethyl benzaldehyde, or the Ehrlich reagent produces the colors ranging from light to dark pink. Its results are reported as Ehrlich units or EU, which are equal to mg per dl, ranging from normal readings which is 0.2 and 1 to abnormal readings of 2, 4, and 8. So this side that is the reagent strip for multi-sticks. So in 0.2 and 1, so it's stated, or it means that it has a normal value of urobilinogen, while for 2, 4, and 8, so it's stated that it has a abnormal value of urobilinogen. So that's the meaning of that. Next is that the chemical formula for the formation of color red for multi-sticks. So the urobilinogen plus the p-dimethylaminobenzaldehyde, so the presence of urobilinogen added with the Ehrlich reagents results with a red color. And next, let's talk about the reagent strip reactions for ChemStrip. So in ChemStrips, it incorporates an azocoupling reaction using 4-methoxybenzene disonium tetrafluorobate to react with urobilinogen, so producing colors ranging from white to pink. And for the both of them, it is more specific on ChemStrip for urobilinogen than Ehrlich. And also, its result is reported also in mg per dl or Ehrlich unit. And this is the chemical formula for ChemStrip. So as you can see, the presence of urobilinogen added with disonium salt, which is the 4-methoxybenzene disonium tetrafluorobate, has a result of red color. And lastly, we will talk about the reaction interference. So, reaction interference is that the Ehrlich reaction on multisticks is subject to a variety of interferences, referred to as Ehrlich reactive compounds that produces false positive reactions. It is sensitivity of reaction increased in temperature. Thus, it is important, or it is performed in room temperature so that the results will not be affected, for it is sensitive in terms of temperature. And false negative results occurs mostly frequently when specimens are improperly preserved, allowing the urobilinogen to be photooxidized by urobilin. And it is also obtained when there is a high concentration of nitrates, which interferes with the azocoupling reaction on ChemStrips. And lastly, it occurs when a formalin is used as preservatives. And highly pigmented urines causes atypical readings in both reagents. And now let's talk about the multisticks reaction interference. First is a false positive, which is the porpovilinogen, indican, p-aminosalicylic acid, sulfonamides, methyl dopa, procane, chlorpromazine, and highly pigmented urine. And for false negative is all specimens and preservation in formalin. And lastly is a reaction interference for ChemStrip, in which it has a false positive in highly pigmented urine and a false negative on all specimens, preservation in formalin, and high concentration of nitrate. So that's all, and thank you, and I hope that you have learned something from me, and bye, senoritas!